behavior. You set the interval at 20 seconds. How long does the behavior need to occur to count as a response? What are we going to do? We are going to attack the question. And by attacking the question, that means we're going to do all our work up front. Before you get to the answer choices, make sure you understand what the question is asking and what's inside the question. What is the question asking? The question is asking how long the behavior needs to occur to count as a response. What type of measurement are we using? We are using partial interval recording. And in partial interval recording, how long does the behavior need to occur? Well, if the behavior occurs at any point during the interval, it's going to count. So if our interval is at 20 seconds, that behavior can occur for 1 second, 2 seconds, 4 seconds, 20 seconds, and it's going to count. Now that we've gone through that process, it's a fairly straightforward question. We know exactly what we're looking for, okay? Be the aggressor on the exam. Don't let the exam come to you. Attack, right? So let's look for our answer. A, 20 seconds. Does the behavior need to occur for 20 seconds to count? No. What type of measurement would that be? That would be whole interval. With whole interval, it needs to occur the entire time. B, 1 to 19 seconds. Be careful here, okay? Yes, if the behavior occurs at any point from 1 to 19 seconds, it's going to count. But what if it occurs for 20 seconds? Do we still count it? Yes, we do. So 1 to 19 seconds isn't quite thorough enough, okay? It's missing 20 seconds because if the interval is 20 seconds and the behavior occurs for 20 seconds, for partial interval data, that's going to count. So B is not quite what we're looking for. C, 1 second. The behavior has to occur for 1 second and it counts. It can occur for more, but as long as it occurs for 1 second, it's going to count for partial interval data. And then D, right at 20 seconds, that would be momentary time sampling. So of course our answer is going to be C. How long does the behavior need to occur to count as a response? Just 1 second. 1 second or more. During the pandemic, you really got into making bread. Everyone was doing it on social media, so you thought you would try. Once things started to get back to normal, you stopped making bread. Tomorrow, you're going to attempt to make bread without the recipe. What are you testing for? Attack the question. What are we asking? We're asking about the idea that you're going to try to make bread, which you learned to do during the pandemic, you haven't done for a while. Now you're going to try again without a recipe. What are you trying to see if you can do? Okay. You want to see, can you still make bread? Has that skill persisted even though you haven't trained on it in a while? You haven't made it in a while. Can you still do it? So when we're testing to see if a skill still exists or is still available, even after testing or teaching is done, what are we doing? What are we testing for? Are we testing for generalization? There's no indication that you're generalizing your bread making, not to a different situation, to a different environment, a different anything, okay? You're just trying to see, can I still do this, right? So B, maintenance will be better than generalization because maintenance is asking, does that skill persist once teaching is done, once you've learned it? So we're going to find out because either you can make the bread or you can't. Behavior contrast is one behavior increasing or decreasing, and then another behavior in another environment increasing or decreasing. No, there's no behavior contrast going on here. And stimulus generalization. Stimulus generalization is what? That's when one response occurs in the presence of multiple stimuli. It doesn't appear any sort of stimulus generalization is happening here. We're really testing for maintenance. Can we still make this bread even though training stopped a while ago, even though we haven't done it in a long time? Our answer is going to be B. Joan is considered an excellent BCBA. She writes great goals based on needs-based assessments. However, sometimes Joan will write goals that are difficult for others to understand. Joan's goal is not what? What is Joan missing here? She's an excellent BCBA, writes great goals based on needs-based assessments. What's the problem? The problem is when other people read her goals, they can't understand them. And is it more important for Joan to understand the goals or for other people, for technicians? Well, of course, Joan is going to understand her own goals, But if the technician doesn't understand the goal, that presents a lot of issues. If the parent doesn't understand the goal, that presents a lot of issues. Joan needs to write it in a way where it's understandable for other people. So Joan's goal is lacking what? Is Joan's goal lacking objectivity? It doesn't appear that way. Okay. She's an excellent BCBA. Great goals based on needs-based assessments. Seems like it's objective. What about observable and measurable? Nothing indicates they're not observable. Nothing indicates they're not measurable. No information is given saying they're not objective, they're not observable, they're not measurable. You have to use the information given to you in the question. And the only information given in the question is that Joan writes goals that are too difficult for others to understand. Other than that, Joan is excellent. So if her goals cannot be understood by others, Joan's goal is not what? It's not technological. Okay. We want our treatment plans, we want our intervention plans to be repeatable, to be understood by others. If you have to transfer a case, you don't want to have to spend your entire time transferring the case, going through each individual goal and explaining each individual goal. Another BCBA, an RBT, a parent should be able to read what you wrote on your treatment plan, your behavior plan, and understand it. It needs to be technological. Behaviorism is the guiding philosophy of behavior science and what? So this is ripped straight from the task list study guide. The task list asks you to distinguish between behaviorism and other types of basically teaching in behaviorism. So things like experimental analysis of behavior, applied behavior analysis in practice, and of course, behaviorism. Behaviorism is the granddaddy of them all, right? It's our guiding philosophy. But in addition to being the guiding philosophy, it's also what? Is it a result of interactions between the individual and others around them? Sure. But is that the best we can do? Do we just pick A and move on? No, because there's a better definition, a more specific and accurate definition if we look at B. Behaviorism is the guiding philosophy of behavior science and a result of interactions between the individual and the environment. What's the difference there? Well, others around them, sure, that's part of the environment, but others around them doesn't include everything in the environment. Think about automatic behavior. Automatic behavior has nothing to do with the social environment. B is just a much better answer. C, radical behaviorism is a type of behaviorism, but that does not complete a sentence. Neither does verbal behavior. Behaviorism is our guiding light, okay? It leads to experimental analysis of behavior. It leads to ABA. It leads to practice of ABA, right? Behaviorism guides it all. Then you have radical behaviorism, methodological behaviorism, verbal behavior, on and on and on, okay? But you need to know at the top of those is behaviorism, the guiding philosophy of behavior science, and it's a result of interactions between the individual and the environment. Al thinks he is being set up for a crime he did not commit. At the police station, he is interviewed by two officers. The first officer said Al took $4 million, while the second officer said Al took $6 million. Based on the given information, the two officers lack what? Be very careful here. Let's attack the question. What does the question ask? It's asking what the officers lack as far as their data. It says based on the given information, okay? So the first officer said Al took $4 million, while the second officer said Al took $6 million. Are the officers in agreement? No, that data is different, okay? And if you have two or more people recording data and they get different things, what are you lacking? Are you lacking validity? Validity says you're not measuring the intended target or the intended behavior or whatever you're intending to measure. Well, both officers measured the amount of money, so their data appears to be valid. What about accurate? Even though they're different, we don't know how much money was actually stolen. We can't determine who is and isn't accurate, okay? So both officers, one officer might be inaccurate and the other might be accurate, but not both, okay? Unless they're both inaccurate, right? But we're not sure based on the given information. Now, if the question had said Al took $5 million. And then the first officer said 4 and the second officer said 6. Then they would lack accuracy. Inter-observer agreement. Yes, these two data points are not in agreement. These two individuals who took data don't agree on the data. It lacks inter-observer agreement. And then reliability. To determine reliability, we would need these two officers to take this data point again. That's reliability. Can you consistently take the data the same way over and over again? We would need more data points to understand reliability. So the only information we can use, and based on the given information, we can only determine the two officers lack IOA. Good lesson in not trying to create information that isn't there. Okay. They're valid. They measure the right thing. We're not sure about the accuracy. We have no way of knowing if they're accurate or not. And we have no way of knowing if they're reliable or not. The only thing we know is they don't agree. They lack inter-observer. You're attempting to study for your RBT exam, but you cannot focus. You ask your boyfriend to turn off the TV so you can get to work. The TV turning off would be considered what? Behavior question. Okay. What is the antecedent? You studying for the exam. Okay. What is the response? You ask your boyfriend to turn off the TV. If the consequence is the TV turning off, okay, what's going to happen? You are going to, in the future, ask your boyfriend to turn off the TV. So is your behavior increasing or decreasing? It's increasing. Now, is something being taken away or something being added? Well, if we turn the TV off, okay, we're removing that stimulus, negative. If you break down behavior questions like that, you should never miss them, okay? So the TV turning off would be considered what? Negative reinforcement. We know it's not punishment, okay? Because if you ask for the TV to turn off, the TV turns off, okay? In the future, if you want the TV off, what are you going to do? You're going to ask to get the TV off. Your behavior is not going to decrease by getting what you want. It's going to increase. And then the TV is going to be taken away. The stimulus is going to be taken away. It's going to be negative. 5 friends are betting on a basketball game during March Madness. They agree that if John wins his bet, they will all take a shot. What type of contingency is this? All right, we have a group contingency question. You need to know group contingencies. In this case, okay, what's happening? We have 5 friends. They're relying on one friend, okay, for all the consequences. And that's what you have to ask yourself, right? Are we reliant on the whole group together? Does the whole group need to engage in the response or complete the contingency? Are we reliant on ourselves? Do only I or you need to complete the contingency? Or are we reliant on a person or a few people in particular? In this case, they're all reliant on what? They're all reliant on John. John wins his bet, they take a shot. John doesn't, they don't take a shot. So what type of contingency is that? Is this a bribe? Well, no, it's not a bribe. A bribe and a contingency are opposites, right? We don't bribe, we use contingencies. So it leaves us with independent, interdependent, and hero. What's another word for hero? That is our dependent group contingency. Independent, of course, right, would be all 5 friends would be worried about their own individual bets. Okay, they're not worried about the other people in the group. Interdependent would say all 5 friends must win their bets. And then the hero or the dependent says John must win his bet. Okay, so make sure you understand that distinction. So what type of contingency are we looking at here? Of course, is going to be D, hero. You're a BCBA and you just conducted an assessment on a client with the help of an RBT. Now that the assessment is done, you should base your interventions on what? This is straight from the task list, okay? You conducted your assessment, you're done. How are we going to choose our interventions, right? Just the assessment alone isn't just going to give us interventions, okay? It's going to do a really good job of guiding us, but there's other things we need to worry about as well. Do we need to be concerned with client preference? Absolutely. Ethically, okay? For social validity reasons, okay? Client preference matters. It always matters, right? Even if our client is quote unquote low functioning, client preference always matters. What about assessment results? Well, of course you want assessment results, right? That's why you do the assessment, to use them to guide your interventions. A and B both look good. C, scientific evidence. You want to use as much scientific evidence as possible. Okay. Remember behaviorism. All of this studying of behaviorism and behavior, okay, leads to us being practitioners of ABA, right? We're taking these technologies, we're taking this knowledge and applying it to real life, socially valid situations. Okay. Scientific evidence is important. So your assessment is done. What do you base your interventions on? Client preference, assessment results, and scientific evidence. So that's going to be D, all the above. Look at H2 on the task list for this task.